Welcome to the Nate Gratian Show, where we talk all things personal finance, investing, and entrepreneurship. I'm Nate, your host. Thank you for joining me here today. Today is the last final week of October. It's just been completed. It is the 29th of October, 2022, and we are going to take a look at the past week, the final full week of the month that happened in the stock market, see what happened in our portfolio on eToro, and see what went on, and a little bit into next week and some of the events that will be taking place and what we'll be doing in our portfolio. This week was a big week of earnings. We had a lot of big companies reporting, especially in the tech sector. Companies like Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, which is Google, Meta, Facebook, and Microsoft reported this week, most of which missed their earnings. If you want to read my reports on the reports, you can find them on eToro, where I post my articles and things like that. But most missed their earnings, most missed the expectations that was set for them to meet and for Q3. But even with that, the major averages rallied and did okay this week, minus the tech sector. The Nasdaq still gained about 2% for the week, but did struggle in comparison to the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial. And so our portfolio for the week, we hit 4.19% for the week, is what our gains were for the final week of October, 4.19%. Our portfolio is quite diversified through the different sectors, so which is part of the reason when one sector struggles, we make gains in other sectors in other areas. So that's how our portfolio did, 4.19%. We didn't deposit any funds into our account this week either. We kept things pretty steady, understanding that it was going to be a big week this week, a big week of earnings, and also the week leading into some of the events that are taking place next week, which we'll get into in a little bit. The ECB, or the European Central Bank, also raised rates this week, 75 basis points, which the market has priced most of that in. And then also in other news, Twitter is now owned by Elon Musk and should by now be taken off of the stock exchange, and so going to be a private company. We'll see whether he brings it back to a public company further down the road. I'll be watching, interestingly, what will, with a lot of curiosity, see what he does there with the company of Twitter. And then also the UK Prime Minister Rishi now is in as UK's newest Prime Minister, and he's wanting to bring about stability, which hopefully can happen because there's been a lot of turmoil there, and so hopefully some stability can take place. And that's kind of the big events that took place this week, the major ones being the earning reports from the big tech companies. But as we look into next week, we have one day left in October, and it's incredible. The Dow Jones is looking to have possibly their best month since 1938. We'll see what happens in that last day of October. We'll see what goes on, but Dow Jones is looking to possibly have that. It'll need to be a good day, but it could set some records if Monday is a good day in the stock market. And then we go into November. Now, November 1st and 2nd, the Fed in the US is meeting. We're expecting another rate rise in the US of 75 basis points. Next week, the RBA, Reserve Bank of Australia, here in Australia, is also meeting, and we're expecting another rate rise here in Australia. Not sure exactly what is expected. The last one was 25, and a lot of people were expecting 35. I'm thinking it'll be somewhere between 25 and a 50, somewhere there here in Australia. Again, just my personal thoughts. Now, in the US, they're expecting a 75 basis point rate hike, which will be the fourth one in a row at 75 points. And then the stock market is looking into December, thinking it may only be maybe a 50 in December, but we will see what happens there, and we'll see what goes on what goes on there. So that's happening the 1st and 2nd, and then on the 2nd we are depositing funds into our eToro account that'll equal somewhere between 1.5% and 2% of our overall portfolio. And so we're going to deposit the funds, and we're actually going to be investing those about 2 days later into 3 areas. So the first is into our usual VOO, that's VOO, Vanguard's ETF that tracks the S&P 500. We'll be investing that, as usual, in there, a small portion that's for our kids' college. The second is going to be adding to our position in Amazon. I looked after Amazon and Meta gave their earnings last week. I was looking at Meta and I was thinking it's become very interesting, but I got to see where their plans are for the future. And then Amazon had a drop as well, 16% for Amazon after hours, but then it did rebound in that session on Friday to only down 9%. Still a significant drop though, but it's piqued my interest to add to our position in Amazon. We already have one position, may add just a little bit. Then we're going to open a new position in Noble, NOBL. This is a ETF by ProShares. It's an ETF by ProShares that tracks 65 companies from the S&P that are dividend aristocrats. So that means these 65 companies have paid a dividend consistently for 25 years plus. They're out of the S&P. They're companies like Archer, ExxonMobil, and Caterpillar. They're in the top 5 of the companies there in this ETF. And so the annual dividend yield is about 2.05% as of this recording. And in the past this particular year to date, it's done about 11% for 2022 as of October 29th, 2022. And then 5 years, it's done just over 43% in the past 5 years. And since inception in 2013, it's done about 111% since inception. So we are looking at investing next week into that, and actually continuing through November. We're going to be adding funds into that position as it fits within 2 of our categories in our portfolio: our market category, and which has multiple sectors, and our income producing category, which pays pretty decent dividends, and so it fits within both those categories. So throughout November, we're going to be adding into our positions in Noble, that's NOBL, ProShares, Dividend Aristocrat ETF. And that's our plan for next week. And then the week finishes off on Friday with November 4th with the jobs payroll number released for October in the US. And this is going to be an important number. It needs to thread the needle about of what's happening in the jobs market. Too strong, or if it's too strong, then the fear of wage inflation comes into play. Too weak, and the fear of a strong recession comes into play. Even though for Q3 the GDP for the US came out positive, and so technical recession is 2 quarters of negative GDP. It did come out positive, so that's quite interesting there. Came out at 2.6% from memory for their GDP, which was above expected and in the green. So we'll see where things go as we go through November. Later in the month, we got the CPI and PPI and all that coming out, but and then the midterm elections on the 8th of November happening, which is a big event taking place. But if you want to read my article about our plans for investing in November, that is also on eToro. But thanks for joining me here today. If you have a question about anything we're doing, or you have a question about investing or personal finance or entrepreneurship, send me a message on Instagram at NateGration, that's NateGration, or my website, ngration.com, that's ngration.com. You can also comment on the YouTube video of this podcast with your question or anything like that, and I'll let you know when we do a podcast episode answering your question or discussing the topic that you may want to know more about. But I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and we will see you in the next episode.